I went to Cedar Point in August of 2023, and I thought that today I would rank most of their coasters. Now, when I say most, I did not get to ride all of their coasters. If you did watch my Cedar Point vlog, then you would know that I didn't ride all of their coasters, but I rode most of their major coasters. Here are the coasters I didn't get to ride. Blue Streak, Wilderness Run, Woodstock Express, those two are kiddie coasters, that's why I didn't ride them. Raptor, because unfortunately it was closed, and Corkscrew and Cedar Creek Mine Ride. But I know that sounds like a lot, but I rode pretty much all of their other major coasters. At my number 9 spot is gonna have to go to Wild Mouse. Now, I'm not saying that this is a really bad coaster, it's just that the restraints are incredibly uncomfortable. These restraints are so uncomfortable. It is such an uncomfortable ride that way, but it is a family coaster, so it's not super intense, but it's definitely a bad ride that way, so that's why it's at my last spot. But it's a family coaster, so there's obviously not like airtime or anything like that. It's a spinning coaster. It's a new for 2023 spinning coaster, but it's not a bad ride. It's just that the restraints make it incredibly uncomfortable. And I'm sure I'm only like 4'8", and it is super uncomfortable with those restraints. And if you're shorter than me, then I'm thinking it's gonna be way more comfortable than it was for me. But it's pretty uncomfortable ride that way. Now, if you are pretty tall, then it might not affect you as much. But for me, if you're short, then it might be pretty uncomfortable and definitely not my favorite ride. Definitely my least favorite ride at Cedar Point. Now, I might get a little bit of hate for having this so low, but at my number 8 spot is gonna have to go to Magnum XL 200. Now, it's not that this coaster is bad, it's just that it's pretty rough for me. The Triangle Hills are so insane. Definitely probably the best part of the ride, but it is pretty rough, janky airtime, but that kind of adds the funness and the intenseness. So I do like that part of the ride, but it's just a very rough ride for me. Now, the restraints are pretty, it depends on if you get stapled or not. Now, I personally did not get stapled, which I was kind of thankful for because it would hurt on the Triangle Hills because it is just an insane part of the ride, especially with the tunnel. I do like the tunnel, especially at the end of the ride with the lights inside and the Triangle Hills. It's just insane, but it is a really good coaster that, especially when I go to Cedar Point, is definitely a must-do. Even though it's not my favorite, it's definitely a must-do because of how historic it is and because it's a very popular ride, and I feel like I have to ride it when I go to Cedar Point. I've only been to Cedar Point once, but I'm planning on going many more later. So definitely when I go, I will be riding Magnum every single time. At my number 7 spot, it's gonna have to go to Gemini. Now, people might be like, whoa, you should have this way lower. Now, I really like Gemini. I think it's a really good coaster. Now, I know there are some rumors of it being removed from the park. Now, I really hope that doesn't happen because I really like Gemini. I think it's a really good coaster that you should definitely check out. I really like the high-fiving factor. It's probably what pushes it up my list a lot. But if it didn't have the high-fiving factor, it'd still be a good ride, but I feel like it wouldn't be as good or up in my list as it is now. But it is just an insane ride. And again, janky airtime, super fun ride. It's very smooth. And it is older than Magnum, and it's smoother than Magnum, which is really weird. Probably because of the type of coaster it is. It isn't as tall, isn't as fast. But it's still a really good ride. Now, I know it's ranked as Thrill on Cedar Point's app. Now, I wouldn't really say it's a thrill coaster. Now, it might be for some people, but for me, it's more of a family coaster. But it's still a really good ride that you should definitely check out when you go to Cedar Point. At my number 6 spot, it's gonna have to go to Gatekeeper. This coaster is really fun. I really like the wing overdrop. I think if it didn't have the wing overdrop, it would be a little bit lower in my list. It really adds to the ride. Now, it wouldn't be much lower, but it'd be maybe a little bit lower because the wing overdrop, like I said, adds to the ride a lot. And I really like the airtime hill, which is really literally right in the middle of the ride. You don't see a lot of wing coasters with the airtime hill. So I think Cedar Point, I like how they did that because they're probably trying to make it a little bit different than other wing coasters. And the keyholes, those are awesome. I actually sat in the outside seat of Gatekeeper because I wanted to have that full effect of the misleading of it might hit your head, which it obviously isn't going to, but I really like that element of the ride and the inversions, all the 0G rolls in the keyholes, which is really fun. Now, I will say if you are in the outside seat, it will have a little bit of a B&M rattle more than the inside seat, but all coasters that are B&M really have that B&M rattle, so you really expect that for all the coasters. But I really like Gatekeeper. It's one of the better coasters at Cedar Point. Now, people might be really surprised by this, but at my number 5 spot is gonna have to be Rougarou. This coaster is really fun. It was my favorite floorless coaster until I rode Medusa at Great Adventure. Now that's my favorite floorless coaster. I have a ranking video for Great Adventure, so go watch that after you watch this. But anyways, back with Rougarou. This coaster is very underrated. When I rode it, I was so surprised. It is way smoother than what people say. People say it's so rough, like it's one of the worst coasters at Cedar Point. No, it's really not. It is a really fun ride. I rode in the second row, and that really got me a really good ride. Really smooth, no really headbanging at all. Maybe with the corkscrews, maybe a little bit, but that doesn't really mean anything. Like all coasters have a B&M rattle, just like I was saying with Gatekeeper, and this coaster does, which all coasters really do. If it's B&M, obviously, if it's not B&M, then it have a different kind of rattle, like an Intamin rattle, like Millie, because Millie is Intamin, and Maverick. But anyways, back with Rougarou. It is a really fun ride, very underrated, and I think that if you go to Cedar Point, don't be scared to ride it because people say that it's rough. Definitely ride it, and I recommend going to the second row because that's how I got a good ride from it, but it is definitely a super good ride. At my number 4 spot, it's gonna have to go to Valravn. This is my first ever dive coaster, and obviously it's my favorite dive coaster so far because it's the only one I've ridden, but I really like it. Same with Gatekeeper, which was my first wind coaster. Millie was my first Giga coaster. Steel Vengeance was my first Hyper Hybrid coaster, and Maverick was my first an Intamin Blitz coaster. A lot of new coasters for me at Cedar Point. But back with Valravn, it's a very fun ride. The Immelman right after the drop is super fun. Obviously, the dive coaster, since it's a dive coaster, the drop is probably the best part of the ride. I really like the 0G roll right at the end of the ride. Definitely gives some really good hang time, mostly sideways hang time, but maybe for people in the back row, maybe a little bit more upside down hang time. I also do like the airtime hill at the end of the ride. It's like a good add to the ride. Now I will say with the vest restraints, maybe it's a little bit. And now I know people, even with Gatekeeper has vest restraints too. And I didn't really mention that with Gatekeeper, but Valorant's and vest restraints maybe a little more uncomfortable. They're a little bit more tighter than Gatekeepers, but I really think it doesn't ruin the ride at all. A lot of people say that it kind of ruins the ride. Vest restraints they're so bad. Now, like even you would say like with Iron Menace coming to Dorney Park, that's gonna have vest restraints for it's gonna be like a bad coaster because they should have different restraints. I think the vest restraints is fine. I don't think it's bad at all. I think it doesn't ruin the ride, but definitely maybe a little bit tight. But I feel like that's with all coasters. Some restraints are different, some restraints are not. But it's definitely still a good ride. At my number 3 spot is gonna have to go to Maverick. Maverick is an insane coaster. The first time I rode it was actually really cool. We got to be in the front row for the first ever time we ever rode Maverick. Never ridden it before in the front row. It was crazy. And I love the launch lift hill, the beyond vertical drop. It's just an insane coaster. Very, very intense. Now, do not underestimate this ride because it is super intense. It might look small, which it is. It's only 105 feet, but it is insane. It is so insane. It's so intense. It does not look intense, and especially with the launch right after the horseshoe rolls or the corkscrews, and it is just insane. That launch is one of the most forceful launches I've ever been on. Maybe a little bit less forceful than King Dakar over at Great Adventure, but still really forceful. And the Snangle Dabs at the end of the ride, super intense. And the airtime on this ride is such good ejector airtime, and is definitely a must-do when you go to Cedar Point. At my number 2 spot is gonna have to go to Steel Vengeance. This is a super fun ride. I love Steel Vengeance. When I first rode it, I thought it was gonna be like overrated because everyone's saying it was like one of their favorite coasters. Like some people were saying it's their favorite coaster of all time. I was like, oh, this is gonna be overrated because everyone's saying it's such a good coaster. But I was wrong. This coaster is super fun, and it's not like I would say it's still intense, but I like how it's a good mix of fun and intense because I don't like coasters that are super intense or too intense. But I still like them, but like not as much. It's just like I like the coasters that are more fun and intense so that you can kind of enjoy them better. And the airtime of this coaster, so intense, so insane, so epic. Just like such a good coaster that way. Most airtime in the world, obviously. So really good ride that way. It's also a really long ride, so good duration for Steel Vengeance. Definitely like good with the inversions, and I really like all the small airtime hills at the end of the ride. It is just so fun, and it is just an insane ride. If you pay attention to the coaster that I already named, then you probably know what my number 1 spot is going to be. this is gonna have to go to Millennium Force, or Millie for short. Millie is an insane coaster. It's my #1 coaster of all time. I really love Millie. It's just an insane ride. The first time I rode it was actually in the morning, and it was going super fast. It was speeding through the layout. It's just insane, super fast. We were in the back row. I put my hands up the entire time. I was so excited to ride Millie, and a lot of people were saying it's forceless. I do not agree with that at all. It is forceful. It's insane. Good flowjector airtime. I would say it's more towards the floater airtime for airtime, but it's still some really good flowjector airtime, mostly flowjector, and definitely some good ejector airtime hills at the end of the ride, especially the speed hill that is right before the turnaround at the end of the ride. Definitely a good part of the ride. Now, I will say, if you are riding this at night, be ready for the bugs. There will be a lot of bugs. If you don't know, Cedar Point is right by Lake Erie, so that is where all the bugs come from, mostly gnats, which are probably the most annoying bugs out there. And if you are riding in the front row at night, you will get bugs all over you. Now, I'm not trying to say this to gross you out, but I'm just letting you guys know to, recommend probably going into the back row, because that's what I did. And I didn't get a lot of bugs on me, maybe a few, but like not in my face or anything, mostly just on my body. But still a good ride, even so. But if you go on the front row at night, just prepare for bugs, is what I'm trying to say, especially in the summer. But if you're not in the summer, say it's like maybe early spring or like fall Fright Fest, then you might get not as much bugs, but still maybe a little bit, because again, right by Lake Erie, which is right by the water, so that's where all the gnats are coming from. But it's still a really good ride, and it's my #1 coaster of all time. It's just insane, and if I could, I would lap Millie all day. Same with Steel Vengeance and Maverick, but my top 0 coasters I could lap all day. But Millie is just an insane ride that you have to ride when you go to Cedar Point. I was hoping to go to Cedar Point for so long until I got to go in August of 2023, which I said in the beginning of the video. It is just an insane park. It's my favorite park, and I did not get to ride all the coasters. I'm looking to definitely ride probably Raptor, maybe even Corkscrew to get the credit in, maybe the other coasters, probably for the credits, especially Raptor, because it's looks like a pretty fun inverted coaster. Like I said, didn't get to ride that because it was unfortunately not open, but definitely looking to ride some more coasters when I go back to Cedar Point. Not sure when, but I'll definitely let you guys know when I do. But that is probably going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye, guys.